Son dies after wedding and leaves a letter for his mother to receive a week later, revealing that. In a quiet Connecticut town, Sarah Thompson's world is turned upside down when her son's wedding leads to a shocking discovery. As she unravels a web of lies spanning generations, Sarah finds herself at the center of a dangerous conspiracy that threatens everything she holds dear. With time running out and powerful enemies closing in, this ordinary mother must summon extraordinary courage to save her son, expose the truth, and protect her town from a sinister plot decades in the making. Will Sarah's determination be enough to overcome the dark forces that have long lurked in the shadows of Millbrook? Or will the weight of long-buried secrets crush her and everyone she loves? In the quaint town of Millbrook, Connecticut, Sarah Thompson stood at her kitchen window, her weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. At 58, her once vibrant auburn hair was now streaked with silver, but her emerald eyes still sparkled with the same determination that had carried her through life's hardest trials. The late August sun cast a golden glow over her meticulously maintained garden, a hobby she'd thrown herself into since her husband's passing 3 years ago. But today, even the sight of her prized roses couldn't lift the weight pressing down on her chest. Sarah's gaze drifted to the calendar hanging on the fridge, its date circled in red, August 30th. In just 2 days, her only son, Michael, would be walking down the aisle. It should have been a moment of pure joy, but a nagging unease had taken root in her heart. "Mom!" Michael's voice startled her from her reverie. She turned to see her son, a spitting image of his late father, leaning against the doorframe. At 32, Michael had made a name for himself as a brilliant young surgeon at Hartford Hospital. "Hey, sweetheart," Sarah smiled, pushing her worries aside. "Just thinking about the big day." "You nervous?" Michael chuckled, running a hand through his dark hair. "A little, but mostly excited. She's amazing, Mom. I can't wait for you two to get to know each other better." Sarah nodded, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She'd only met Emily a handful of times since Michael had announced their whirlwind engagement 6 months ago. The girl seemed nice enough, but there was something off about her that Sarah couldn't quite put her finger on. "I'm sure we will," Sarah said, setting her mug down. "So what brings you by? I thought you'd be knee-deep in last-minute preparations." Michael's expression shifted, a flicker of, was that guilt, crossing his face. "Actually, Mom, there's something I need to talk to you about." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What is it, honey?" Michael took a deep breath, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his shirt, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "Emily and we've decided to move to California after the wedding. I've been offered a position at a cutting-edge research hospital in San Francisco. It's an incredible opportunity, Mom." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. California? That was clear across the country. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself, forcing a smile onto her face. "That's wonderful news, Michael. I'm so proud of you." But even as the words left her mouth, Sarah felt a chill settle over her. There was something in Michael's eyes, a shadow that hadn't been there before. As he began to elaborate on the details of the move, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her son was hiding something that went far beyond a cross-country relocation. Little did Sarah know, this conversation was just the first domino in a chain of events that would unravel everything she thought she knew about her son, his fiancée, and the life they were about to begin together. As Michael's voice faded into background noise, Sarah's mind raced with questions. What wasn't he telling her? And why did she have the sinking feeling that by the time she uncovered the truth, it might already be too late? The next morning, Sarah found herself at Millbrook's local diner, seeking solace in the company of her oldest friend, Detective Jack Hawkins. At 60, Jack's salt and pepper hair and weathered face spoke of years spent unraveling the town's mysteries, both big and small. "I don't know, Jack," Sarah sighed, stirring her untouched coffee. "Am I just being an overprotective mother? Or is there really something off about all this?" Jack leaned back in the vinyl booth, his sharp blue eyes studying Sarah's face. "Trust your gut, Sarah. It's kept you out of trouble this long." He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've known Michael since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. This rushed wedding, the sudden move, it's not like him. Sarah nodded, relief flooding through her at having her concerns validated. There's something about Emily, too. I can't put my finger on it, but... Hold that thought, Jack interrupted, his gaze fixed on something over Sarah's shoulder. She turned to see Emily herself entering the diner, looking picture-perfect in a floral sundress. But it wasn't Emily's appearance that caught Sarah's attention. It was the man she was with. Tall, dark-haired, and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He was most definitely not Michael. Sarah watched, her coffee growing cold, as Emily and the mystery man settled into a corner booth, their heads close together in intense conversation. Well, Jack murmured. Isn't that interesting? Sarah's mind raced. Could this be innocent? A wedding planner, perhaps? But the way Emily leaned in, her hand briefly touching the man's arm, spoke of a familiarity that sent alarm bells ringing in Sarah's head. Jack, Sarah whispered, her voice tight. I need you to do something for me. It's not exactly ethical, but I need to know what's going on before this wedding happens. Jack raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Sarah Thompson, are you asking me to abuse my power as a detective? I'm asking you to help me protect my son, Sarah replied, her green eyes flashing with determination. Jack nodded slowly, his expression growing serious. All right, I'll see what I can dig up on our mysterious bride-to-be. But Sarah, he added, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand, be careful. If there is something going on here, it might be bigger than you realize. As they left the diner, Sarah caught one last glimpse of Emily and her companion. The man was now on his phone, his face twisted in an expression of barely contained anger. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she realized that whatever was happening, the clock was ticking. She had less than 48 hours to uncover the truth before Michael said, I do, to a woman who might be hiding far more than Sarah could have ever imagined. Little did Sarah know, her decision to investigate would set in motion a chain of events that would not only threaten to derail the wedding, but would also unearth long-buried secrets that would shake the very foundation of everything she thought she knew about her family, her town, and even herself. As she climbed into her car, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Can't wait for you to walk me down the aisle, Mom. Love you. Sarah's heart clenched. Whatever the cost, she had to protect her son. But as she started the engine, a nagging question echoed in her mind. In her quest for the truth, what if she ended up losing Michael forever? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Millbrook, Sarah found herself parked outside the local library. Her conversation with Jack had left her restless, and she knew sleep would elude her until she took action. With determination in her step, she made her way to the microfilm archives, thankful for the late hours the small-town library kept. Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard, searching for any mention of Emily in the town's records. Hours ticked by, her eyes growing weary from the flickering screen. Just as she was about to call it quits, a headline from 5 years ago caught her attention. Local woman vanishes without a trace, foul play suspected. The article detailed the disappearance of one Amelia Blackwood, a 25-year-old paralegal who had gone missing after a night out with friends. As Sarah scanned the grainy photograph accompanying the piece, her blood ran cold. The missing woman was the spitting image of Emily. It can't be, Sarah whispered, her mind reeling. But the resemblance was uncanny. Same heart-shaped face, same piercing blue eyes. Only the hair was different. Amelia's a rich chestnut, while Emily sported platinum blonde locks. Digging deeper, Sarah uncovered more articles about Amelia's disappearance. The investigation had gone cold after a few months, with no body found and no suspects named. But one detail stood out. Amelia had last been seen arguing with a man described as tall, dark-haired, and wearing an expensive suit. Sarah's hands shook as she recalled the man she'd seen with Emily at the diner. Could it be the same person? And if so, what did it mean for Michael? As she was about to log off, a small notice in the corner of one article caught her eye. It mentioned that Amelia had a younger sister who had been devastated by her disappearance. The sister's name? Emily Blackwood. Sarah's mind raced. Was Emily somehow involved in her sister's disappearance? Or was she using her missing sister's identity for some nefarious purpose? And how did Michael fit into all of this? Just then, her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Got some info. Meet me at the old water tower. Now. Heart pounding, Sarah gathered her things and rushed out of the library. As she drove through the quiet streets of Millbrook, a fog began to roll in, thick and ominous. It seemed to Sarah that the very air was conspiring to conceal the truth she so desperately sought. She pulled up to the base of the water tower, a looming silhouette against the starless sky. Jack's car was already there, but the detective was nowhere to be seen. Jack! Sarah called out, her voice swallowed by the mist. A twig snapped behind her, and she whirled around, her heart in her throat. I was hoping you wouldn't dig this deep, Sarah. Came a familiar voice, but it wasn't Jack who emerged from the shadows. It was Michael. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Michael? What are you doing here? Where's Jack? Michael's face was a mask of regret and something darker, fear. Mom, you need to stop investigating. Please, you don't understand what you're getting into. Then help me understand. Sarah pleaded, reaching for her son. But Michael took a step back, his eyes darting nervously to the shadows around them. I can't explain now, but after the wedding, I promise I'll tell you everything. Just trust me, okay? And whatever you do, don't trust M-. Michael's words were cut off by the sharp crack of a gunshot. Sarah screamed as her son crumpled to the ground, revealing a figure standing behind him, gun still raised. As Sarah rushed to Michael's side, her world spinning, she looked up to see the shooter step into the dim light. Her heart stopped as she recognized the face. It was the man from the diner, his expensive suit now splattered with her son's blood. I'm sorry you had to see that, Mrs. Thompson, the man said, his voice cold and emotionless. But I'm afraid your son made a grave mistake, and now so have you. As darkness closed in around Sarah, the last thing she saw was Emily emerging from the fog, her blue eyes now hard and unrecognizable. Sarah's final thought before unconsciousness took her was a desperate prayer. Please, let Michael be alive. Little did Sarah know, this night would mark the beginning of a nightmare that would test her limits, challenge everything she believed, and force her to confront truths about her family and herself that she never could have imagined. Sarah's consciousness returned slowly, like a ship emerging from a dense fog. The first thing she registered was the dull throb at the back of her head, followed by the cold, hard surface beneath her. As her eyes fluttered open, she found herself in near-total darkness, save for a thin sliver of light seeping in from under what appeared to be a door. Panic surged through her as the events at the water tower came flooding back. Michael! She gasped, her voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. She tried to move, only to discover her wrists and ankles were bound with what felt like zip ties. Mom! A weak voice came from somewhere to her left. Mom, is that you? Relief washed over Sarah like a tidal wave. Michael! Oh, thank God. Are you hurt? Where are we? There was a shuffling sound, followed by a pained groan. I'm okay, I think. The bullet just grazed my side. But Mom, listen to me. We don't have much time. There's so much I need to tell you. Sarah's mind raced. Michael, what's going on? Who were those people? And Emily. Emily isn't who you think she is, Michael interrupted, his voice urgent. Her real name is Lena Kozlov. She's part of a Russian crime syndicate that's been operating in the States for years. I got in too deep, Mom. I was laundering money for them through the hospital. Sarah felt as if the wind had been knocked out of her. Her son, her brilliant, kind-hearted boy, involved with the mob? But why? She managed to choke out. Michael's voice cracked with emotion. It started small. I was drowning in student debt, and they offered a way out. By the time I realized how deep I was in, it was too late. They threatened you, Mom. Said they'd hurt you if I didn't cooperate. Tears stung Sarah's eyes as the pieces started to fall into place. And the wedding? The move to California? A cover, Michael admitted. They're expanding their operation to the West Coast. They needed me to set up new channels for their money. But Mom, I couldn't go through with it. I was going to turn myself in, expose the whole operation. That's why they... His words were cut short by the sound of approaching footsteps. The door swung open, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. Sarah squinted, making out the silhouettes of two figures, the man from the water tower and Emily, or rather Lena. How touching, Lena sneered, her accent now distinctly Eastern European. A family reunion. Enjoy it while it lasts. The man stepped forward, his cold eyes fixed on Sarah. Mrs. Thompson, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Dmitry Volkov. I believe we have a mutual interest in your son's future. Sarah struggled against her bonds, fury overriding her fear. If you hurt him, I swear to God dash. Dmitry's laughter cut her off. My dear lady, your son sealed his fate the moment he decided to betray us. But you still have a choice to make. He crouched down, his face inches from Sarah's. We know about your late husband's insurance policy. The one you've been too noble to touch. $5 million, isn't it? Sign it over to us, and we might be persuaded to show your son mercy. Sarah's mind reeled. How did they know about the insurance money? And then it hit her, Jack. He must have been working with them all along. Don't do it, Mom, Michael shouted. They'll kill us both anyway. Lena sighed dramatically, pulling out a sleek handgun. Such pessimism, darling. And here I thought we had something special. As Sarah watched the woman she had almost welcomed as a daughter-in-law point a gun at her son, time seemed to slow down. In that moment, she made a decision that would alter the course of not just this night, but the rest of her life. Wait, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll do it. I'll sign over the money. But I want your word that you'll let Michael go. Dmitry's eyes glittered with triumph. Mrs. Thompson, you have my word as a gentleman. As Lena lowered her gun, a commotion erupted from somewhere above them. Shouts and the sound of breaking glass filtered down, followed by a loud, authoritative voice. FBI! Nobody move! Chaos erupted in the small room. Dmitry and Lena exchanged panicked looks before bolting for the door. The last thing Sarah saw before the room plunged back into darkness was Michael somehow breaking free from his bonds and lunging at Dmitry. In the pitch black, with the sounds of a struggle all around her, Sarah Thompson made a silent vow. No matter what happened next, no matter the cost, she would see this through. She would protect her son, expose the truth, and make sure justice was served, even if it meant sacrificing everything she held dear. Little did she know, the night's revelations were only the beginning of a journey that would test her resolve, challenge her perceptions, and ultimately lead her to uncover a truth far more shocking than anything she had imagined. The darkness that enveloped Sarah was suddenly pierced by flashes of light and the deafening sound of gunshots. She instinctively tried to make herself as small as possible, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Michael! She screamed, but her voice was lost in the cacophony of shouts and breaking glass. Suddenly, strong hands grabbed her, and she felt her bonds being cut. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Agent Carson with the FBI. We're getting you out of here. As Sarah was pulled to her feet, her eyes struggled to adjust to the strobing lights of the raid. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of the scene unfolding around her. Dmitry was on the ground, his hands behind his back as an agent cuffed him. Lena was nowhere to be seen. And Michael, Sarah's breath caught as she saw her son, his shirt stained with blood, being led out by two agents. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and the look of utter despair on Michael's face shattered her heart. Wait, Sarah pleaded with Agent Carson. My son, I need to talk to him. I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but your son is under arrest. We need to get you to safety now. As Sarah was ushered out of the building, which she now recognized as an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, her mind was reeling. The cool night air hit her face, and she gulped it down, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Hours later, Sarah found herself in an austere room at the local FBI field office. Agent Carson sat across from her, his face a mask of professional concern. "Mrs. Thompson, I know this is a lot to process, but we need your statement. Can you tell me what happened tonight?" Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I need to know something first. Is my son okay?" Agent Carson nodded. "Michael is fine. His wound was superficial. But Mrs. Thompson, you need to understand the gravity of the situation. Your son was involved in a major money laundering operation for the Kozlov syndicate. He's facing serious charges." Sarah's mind flashed back to Michael's words in the warehouse. "He was being blackmailed," she said firmly. "They threatened my life to force his cooperation." Agent Carson's expression softened slightly. "We'll certainly look into that. But for now, I need you to tell me everything you know." And so, Sarah began her tale, starting with her suspicions about Emily and leading up to the events at the water tower. As she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. "There's one thing I don't understand," Sarah said as she finished her account. "How did the FBI know to raid the warehouse tonight?" A ghost of a smile played on Agent Carson's lips. "We had an inside man. Detective Jack Hawkins has been working undercover for us for months, gathering evidence on the Kozlov syndicate." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Jack? But I thought—" "At the water tower." "Detective Hawkins never made it to the water tower," Agent Carson explained. "He was intercepted by Dimitri's men, but he managed to signal us before they took him. That's how we knew where to find you." As relief washed over her, Sarah's thoughts turned back to Michael. "What's going to happen to my son?" Agent Carson leaned forward, his voice low. "Mrs. Thompson, there's something you need to know. The operation we took down tonight is just the tip of the iceberg. We have reason to believe that this goes much higher up, possibly involving corrupt officials in local government and law enforcement." Sarah's blood ran cold as the implications sank in. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your son might be the key to unraveling something much bigger than a simple money laundering scheme. But to do that, we need your help." As Sarah sat there, weighing the agent's words, she realized that the nightmare was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. She would do whatever it took to save her son and uncover the truth, no matter how ugly or dangerous it might be. Little did Sarah know, her decision in that moment would set in motion a chain of events that would not only change her life forever, but would also expose a web of corruption and deceit that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. The following days passed in a blur for Sarah. She found herself in a safe house on the outskirts of Hartford, surrounded by FBI agents and a constant hum of activity. Her mind raced with questions, each answer leading to more unknowns. On the third day, Agent Carson entered the room, his face grim. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to talk." Sarah steeled herself. "Is it about Michael?" Carson nodded, taking a seat across from her. "We've been interrogating your son and cross-referencing his statement with the evidence we've gathered. It's complicated." "What do you mean, complicated?" Sarah leaned forward, her heart racing. Carson sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Your son wasn't just a pawn in this operation. He was instrumental in setting up a sophisticated network of shell companies and offshore accounts. His medical expertise was used to create believable paper trails for patients who were actually high-ranking members of the syndicate." Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. "But he said they were threatening him, that he had no choice." "That may have been true at first," Carson conceded. "But as we dug deeper, we found evidence that Michael was receiving substantial payments. Payments that go far beyond simple blackmail." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "No, there has to be some mistake. My son wouldn't." Carson's voice softened. "Mrs. Thompson, I know this is hard to hear, but we need to face facts. Your son was deeper in this than he led you to believe." As Sarah struggled to process this information, a thought struck her. "Wait, you said this goes higher up, into local government and law enforcement." How high are we talking? Carson's expression turned grave. We have reason to believe that the corruption reaches all the way to the state level, possibly even federal. Sarah's mind reeled. And you think Michael knows something about this? We do, Carson nodded. But he's not talking. That's where you come in. Sarah straightened, a fierce determination settling over her. What do you need me to do? We need you to visit Michael. Wear a wire. See if you can get him to open up about the higher-ups involved. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. You want me to spy on my own son? Carson leaned forward, his eyes intense. Mrs. Thompson, I understand how difficult this is, but if Michael is involved with corruption at this level, he's in grave danger. The people behind this won't hesitate to silence him permanently. Our best chance of protecting him is to get him to cooperate fully. As Sarah contemplated Carson's words, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The truth lies in the past. Look to where it all began. Jay. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Jack. He was alive and trying to tell her something. She looked up at Carson, a new resolve in her eyes. I'll do it, but I have a condition. I need access to all the files you have on this case going back as far as you can. There's something I need to check. Carson hesitated, then nodded. All right, but whatever you find, you bring it to me first. Understood. Sarah agreed, her mind already racing. As Carson left to make arrangements for her visit with Michael, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of a precipice. Whatever she uncovered in those files, whatever Michael revealed, she knew it would change everything. Little did she know, the web of deceit she was about to unravel stretched back decades, intertwining with her own family history in ways she could never have imagined. As she prepared to face her son, Sarah Thompson steeled herself for the hard truths and difficult choices that lay ahead. The clock was ticking, and somewhere out there, powerful people were moving to protect their secrets. Sarah's quest for the truth was about to become a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with her son's life hanging in the balance. Sarah sat in a dimly lit room at the FBI field office, surrounded by stacks of files. Her eyes burned from hours of poring over documents, searching for the elusive thread that would tie everything together. As she reached for another folder, a yellowed newspaper clipping fluttered to the floor. Sarah bent to retrieve it, and her breath caught in her throat as she read the headline. Local doctor found dead in apparent suicide. The article, dated nearly 30 years ago, detailed the death of Dr. Robert Thompson, Sarah's father-in-law and Michael's grandfather. Sarah had never met the man. He had died before she married into the family. Michael's father had rarely spoken of him, and Sarah had always assumed it was due to the pain of losing a parent to suicide. But as she read the article, details jumped out at her that didn't add up. Dr. Thompson had been found in his office at Millbrook General Hospital, an apparent overdose of hospital medication. But the article mentioned inconsistencies in the autopsy report and unanswered questions about the circumstances of his death. Sarah's mind raced. Could this be connected to the current situation? She dug deeper into the files, her heart pounding as she uncovered more articles and reports from that time. Dr. Thompson, it seemed, had been involved in a whistleblower case just weeks before his death. He had reported suspicious financial activities at the hospital, hinting at a larger conspiracy involving local officials and businessmen. As Sarah connected the dots, a chilling picture began to emerge. The corruption they were dealing with now wasn't new. It had roots going back decades, tendrils reaching into every aspect of Millbrook's power structure. Her phone buzzed again, another text from the unknown number. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but sometimes the tree is poisoned at the root. Jay. Sarah's hands shook as she realized the implications. Michael wasn't just caught up in someone else's scheme. He was unknowingly continuing a family legacy of corruption and cover-ups. Suddenly, the door opened, and Agent Carson entered. Mrs. Thompson, it's time. Are you ready to see Michael? Sarah stood, her mind still reeling from her discoveries. Yes, I'm ready. But Agent Carson, there's something you need to see first. As she laid out the evidence she'd uncovered, Carson's face grew increasingly grim. This changes everything. Mrs. Thompson, you understand what this means, don't you? If your son is involved in this, it goes far beyond money laundering. We're talking about a multi-generational conspiracy that's corrupted the very foundations of this town. Sarah nodded, a steely resolve settling over her. I understand, and that's why I need to talk to Michael alone. No wire, no surveillance. Just a mother and her son. Carson started to protest, but Sarah held up a hand. Trust me, Agent Carson. I know my son. If there's any chance of getting to the truth, this is it. After a long moment, Carson nodded. All right, but we'll be right outside. If anything goes wrong, it won't, Sarah assured him, though her heart was racing. As she was led to the interview room where Michael was waiting, Sarah's mind whirled with questions. How much did Michael know? Was he a willing participant or a pawn in a game that had started before he was born? She paused at the door, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Whatever happened next, she knew that nothing would ever be the same. The truth she was about to uncover would either save her son or condemn him, and possibly tear apart the very fabric of Millbrook in the process. With one last silent prayer, Sarah opened the door to face her son and the dark legacy that bound them both. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah stepped into the small, sterile room. Michael sat at a metal table, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked up as she entered, his eyes a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Sarah took a seat across from him, her heart aching at the sight of her son in such a state. "Michael," she began, struggling to keep her voice steady, "I need you to tell me everything. No more lies, no more half-truths. Start from the beginning." Michael's shoulders slumped. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his words coming out in a rush. "It started when I was in med school. I found some of Grandpa's old journals in the attic. At first, I thought they were just medical notes, but then I started noticing patterns, references to something called Operation Cleansing Spring." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had seen that phrase in the files she'd been reviewing. Michael continued, "I didn't understand it all at first, but I got curious. I started digging, and that's when they approached me. Men in suits saying they were old friends of Grandpa. They told me about the family legacy, how Grandpa had been part of something bigger, something that was going to change Millbrook for the better." "And you believed them?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael's eyes met hers, filled with shame. "At first, I was skeptical, but they showed me things, Mom. Documents, recordings. They made it seem like Grandpa was some kind of hero, working undercover to expose corruption. They said I could continue his work, make a real difference." Sarah's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of truth she'd uncovered. "But it was all a lie, wasn't it? They were using you, just like they used your grandfather." Michael nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I realized too late. By the time I understood what was really going on, I was in too deep. They had dirt on me, on you. I thought I could play along, gather evidence, and then expose them. But then Lena, came into the picture," Sarah finished for him. "Yeah," Michael said, his voice hollow. "She was my handler. I thought I could trust her. I was such a fool." Sarah reached across the table, taking her son's hands in hers. "Michael, listen to me. What you've done. It's serious, but it's not too late to make things right. Tell me about Operation Cleansing Spring. Who's behind all this?" Michael's eyes darted nervously to the door. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Mom, it goes all the way to the top. The mayor, the police chief, even some state officials. They've been using Millbrook as a front for years, laundering money, running drugs, manipulating real estate deals. But that's not even the worst of it." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "There's a plan in motion. Something big. They're calling it the Final Cleanse. I don't know all the details, but it's happening soon. Really soon. And if we don't stop it, Millbrook as we know it will cease to exist." Just then, the door burst open. Agent Carson rushed in, his face pale. "Mrs. Thompson, Michael, we need to move." Now, what's going on? Sarah demanded, rising to her feet. Carson's eyes were wild with urgency. We've been compromised. Someone high up in the bureau is involved. They're coming for Michael, and they'll eliminate anyone who gets in their way. As alarms began to blare throughout the building, Sarah made a split-second decision. She grabbed Michael's arm, her eyes blazing with determination. We're not running. Not anymore. It's time to end this once and for all. Michael nodded, a flicker of his old strength returning to his eyes. What's the plan, Mom? Sarah turned to Carson. Agent, we need your help. It's time to bring Operation Cleansing Spring out of the shadows and into the light. As they rushed out of the room, Sarah's mind was already racing, formulating a plan. She knew the risks were enormous, but the stakes were even higher. The fate of her son, her town, and perhaps even more hung in the balance. Little did Sarah know, the final act of this decades-long drama was about to unfold, and her role would be pivotal in determining whether justice would prevail or if the shadows of corruption would consume everything she held dear. As sirens wailed in the distance, Sarah, Michael, and Agent Carson raced through the back alleys of Millbrook. The town Sarah had known her entire life now felt alien and hostile, every shadow potentially concealing an enemy. We need a safe place to regroup, Carson panted as they ducked behind a dumpster, the sound of screeching tires echoing nearby. Sarah's mind raced. The old Thompson clinic. It's been abandoned for years, but my husband kept it in the family. There's a hidden basement that few people know about. They made their way to the dilapidated building on the outskirts of town. As Sarah fumbled with the rusty lock, Michael kept watch, his eyes darting nervously. Once inside, Sarah led them to a dusty bookcase. With a grunt, she pushed it aside, revealing a narrow staircase. Down here, she whispered. In the dim light of the basement, Carson pulled out a burner phone. I have a contact in the state police, someone I trust. I'm gonna call for backup. As Carson made his call, Sarah turned to Michael. We need to know everything about this final cleanse. What exactly are they planning? Michael ran a hand through his hair, his face etched with worry. It's a complete takeover of the town. They're going to stage a major crisis. I think it involves the water supply. Then, under the guise of emergency response, they'll implement martial law. It's the perfect cover to eliminate anyone who might expose them and consolidate their power once and for all. Sarah's blood ran cold. When? Tomorrow night, Michael replied, his voice barely above a whisper. During the town's annual summer festival. Maximum chaos, minimum suspicion. Carson rejoined them, his face grim. My contact is mobilizing a team, but it'll take time. We're on our own for now. Sarah's mind was already formulating a plan. We need evidence. Hard, irrefutable proof that will expose everyone involved. Mom, Michael interjected. I know where we can find it. Lena, Emily, she keeps a failsafe. A digital drive with everything on it. Names, dates, transactions. It's her insurance policy. Where is it? Carson demanded. In a safety deposit box at Millbrook National Bank, Michael replied. But we'll never get to it. The bank manager is in on it. He'll alert them the moment we show up. Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. Then we don't show up as ourselves. Carson, you said you have a contact in the state police. Can they get us some disguises? As the plan took shape, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of terror and exhilaration. This was so far beyond anything she'd ever imagined doing, and yet, it felt right. She was fighting for her son, for her town, for the truth. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. Be ready. Jay. Sarah showed the message to Carson. It's Jack. He's still out there, still fighting. We're not alone in this. As they prepared to put their daring plan into action, Sarah looked at her son. Despite everything, she felt a surge of pride. They had been pawns in a larger game, but now they were taking control of their destiny. Michael, she said softly, whatever happens, I want you to know that I love you. We're going to make this right. Michael nodded, tears in his eyes. I love you too, Mom. I'm sorry for everything, but I promise we'll fix this. Together. As they ascended the stairs, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah knew that the next 24 hours would determine not just their fate, but the fate of Millbrook itself. The final battle against decades of corruption and deceit was about to begin, and Sarah Thompson, once just a simple widow, now stood at the center of it all. Little did they know, the true extent of the conspiracy was even greater than they imagined, and the forces aligned against them were preparing for a confrontation that would shake Millbrook to its very foundations. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Millbrook's main street as Sarah, Michael, and Carson approached Millbrook National Bank. Sarah barely recognized herself in the reflection of the bank's windows, her hair now a short, dark wig, her face aged with expertly applied makeup. Beside her, Michael was equally transformed, sporting a beard and thick-rimmed glasses. Carson, disguised as a maintenance worker, gave them a subtle nod before disappearing around the back of the building. Their plan was in motion. Sarah took a deep breath, squeezing Michael's hand. Ready? Michael nodded, his jaw set with determination. Let's finish this. They entered the bank, the cool air conditioning a stark contrast to the humid summer morning outside. Sarah approached the teller, her heart pounding. Good morning, she said, adopting a slight southern drawl. I'm here to access my safety deposit box. The teller smiled politely. Of course, ma'am. May I see some identification? Sarah handed over the forged documents Carson's contact had provided. As the teller examined them, Sarah's eyes darted around the bank, noting the security cameras and the position of the guards. Suddenly, an alarm blared. Sarah's heart leapt to her throat, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was part of the plan. Carson's voice came over the bank's PA system. This is a routine fire drill. Please evacuate the building calmly and quickly. As confusion erupted, Sarah and Michael slipped away from the crowd, making their way to the safety deposit box room. Michael quickly located the right box and opened it with the key they had obtained through Carson's less-than-legal channels. Inside was a small, unassuming flash drive. This is it, Michael whispered, pocketing the device. They were almost to the exit when a voice called out, "Stop right there." Sarah turned to see the bank manager, his face contorted with rage, pointing a gun at them. Did you really think it would be that easy? Time seemed to slow down. Sarah saw the manager's finger tighten on the trigger. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact. But the shot never came. Instead, there was a loud thud. Sarah opened her eyes to see the manager crumpled on the floor, and behind him stood a familiar figure, Detective Jack Hawkins. Sorry I'm late to the party, Jack said with a grim smile. Traffic was hell. As sirens approached in the distance, Jack ushered them out through a back exit. I've got a car waiting. We need to move. Now. As they sped away from the bank, Sarah's mind was reeling. They had the evidence, but the danger was far from over. The final cleanse was still set to begin in mere hours, and the conspirators would stop at nothing to see their plan through. Sarah looked at the flash drive in Michael's hand. Let's see what secrets this little thing holds, she said, her voice steely with resolve. As Jack drove them to a secure location, Sarah knew that the final confrontation was approaching. The truth was within their grasp, but the most dangerous part of their journey still lay ahead. Little did they know, the revelations contained on that small flash drive would shake the foundations of not just Millbrook, but the entire state, setting in motion a chain of events that would be felt for years to come. Thank you very much for listening to this story. Comment below what you thought of the ending and from which city you're listening to us. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, click on the next story that's appearing on your screen now. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories together. See you soon.